An observation made on September 12, 2025, shattered every assumption astronomers held about how our universe operates. Blazing in from the dark expanse of deep space was a colossal object. Its tail stretched across the heavens, 5 times the width of a full moon, and it was so impossibly enormous that backyard amateur astronomers could spot it with basic telescopes. Within hours, confirmation arrived. This was no ordinary comet. It was far brighter, far larger, and infinitely stranger than anything ever recorded in human history. Officially designated as C-2025-R2, it is now known simply as SWAN. But what truly froze the scientific community in disbelief was the timing. Because racing toward the sun from the exact opposite side of the sky was another object, the already infamous 3I Atlas. Both anomalies were scheduled to reach their closest approach to the sun within the exact same 10-day window. Both would be perfectly hidden by solar glare during their most critical moments. And both were exhibiting behaviors that violently defied the laws of nature. The mathematical odds of a cosmic double entry like this happening purely by chance are so vanishingly low that some researchers have stopped using the word coincidence entirely. Instead, they have started whispering the word mission. If one interstellar anomaly was bizarre enough, the arrival of a second, 100 times larger and targeting the exact same solar corridor, suggests we aren't witnessing astronomical accidents at all. We might be watching an operation. The fortress and the drone. As the data poured in, SWAN's sheer size wasn't the only thing that stood out. Its behavior was equally impossible. Typical comets scatter light in highly predictable patterns, but SWAN's reflective properties revealed metallic signatures. It showed traces of cobalt and nickel, the exact same materials humanity uses to forge corrosion-resistant alloys. Some scientists began referring to it as the fortress. While normal comets fracture and break apart under the sun's intense thermal stress, SWAN appeared armored, shielded, and maintained a brightness curve that natural dust and ice simply could not explain. Furthermore, its record-breaking tail didn't behave like chaotic, boiling vapor. It pulsed with rhythmic, subtle changes, almost as if controlled microthrusts were actively guiding its trajectory. Picture a skyscraper-sized tank drifting through the void, cloaked in a shimmering halo that might actually be an electromagnetic shield deflecting the fury of solar winds. That is the terrifying reality scientists are currently grappling with. But even more unsettling than SWAN's scale is the timing of its companion. Because while SWAN looms like a fortress, the smaller 3I Atlas operates like a drone. It is erratic, agile, and executes strange bursts of acceleration and tail color shifts that defy any natural process. Together, they do not look like random celestial wanderers. They look like two pieces of the same puzzle, a unified system converging on our sun simultaneously, perfectly hidden from us during the exact days their true purpose might be unveiled. The solar blackout. When researchers map the arrival vectors of Atlas and SWAN, something extraordinary becomes undeniable. Atlas hails from Sagittarius. SWAN approaches from Aquarius. Their origins are separated by more than a quarter of the entire celestial sphere. Yet, despite their radically divergent approach angles, both objects pierce the inner solar system at nearly the identical solar distance, reaching perihelion within a mere 3 days of one another. Statistically speaking, this level of synchrony is impossible. Random comets scatter their visits across decades, sometimes even centuries. Never like this. And then the blackout hits. Between October 8th and October 18th, the overwhelming glare of the sun blinds our telescopes, creating a critical window where neither Atlas nor SWAN can be directly observed. As a result, their closest approach to both the sun and to each other occurs at the precise moment Earth's instruments are effectively blind. To many experts, this looks less like a fluke and more like deliberate coordination, as if their orbital paths were engineered to intersect under the impenetrable cover of solar interference. Think about the implications of that. Two anomalies arriving in tandem, perfectly timing their rendezvous for the one place and time we cannot watch them. In orbital dynamics, this is known as a corridor, a narrow window of time and space where two objects align in a manner that utterly defies randomness. Whether by design or by chance, this corridor has forced the scientific world to confront a terrifying possibility they have long avoided. What if they aren't simply passing through? What if they are converging for a distinct purpose? Impossible energy. While their orbital mechanics raise profound questions, their energy data triggers outright alarms. Atlas had already stunned researchers with sudden bursts of acceleration that perfectly mimicked thruster maneuvers, with each pulse requiring the equivalent output of 10 nuclear power plants to explain. But SWAN makes Atlas look trivial. Its implied energy levels hover around 10,000 gigawatts, an output greater than the entire power grid of planet Earth. No natural comet nucleus possesses that kind of raw power. Its persistent halo, rhythmic pulses, and reflective metals point not to outgassing, but to active control. It behaves like a machine, utilizing plasma bursts to steer. The concept of engineered propulsion, once completely dismissed as fringe science fiction, is now quietly circulating among serious astronomers who simply can no longer ignore the math. Furthermore, the timing of these pulses is dangerously regular. They are patterned enough to hint at communication, and consistent enough that some are relabeling SWAN from a fortress to a beacon. If Atlas is indeed a drone, adjusting and maneuvering, then SWAN could be the mothership, a colossal structure built to endure millennia in the void, arriving now not by cosmic accident, but by a predetermined cycle, the 22,000-year cycle. With a calculated orbital period exceeding 22,000 years, SWAN could have charted this exact path long before the dawn of recorded history, perhaps right at the end of the last ice age. It may have left behind traces that our ancient ancestors remembered through carvings, warnings, and myths. And now, it has returned, perfectly aligned with a second anomaly, seemingly to remind us that we are not the only intelligence molding the heavens. Just as global curiosity peaked, a heavy silence fell. Space agencies, including ESA and NASA, quietly restricted the release of data, suspending radar tracking and high-resolution imaging during the exact window the two objects approached the sun. Officially, institutions cited solar conjunction downtime as a standard safety protocol. Behind the scenes, however, leaked directives revealed explicit orders: deny raw data requests, avoid public statements, and completely reroute any proposals for alternative observations. This blackout wasn't natural, it was strictly enforced. Yet, institutional silence only supercharged the efforts of independent astronomers. Desperate to capture fragments of the truth governments were hiding, grassroots networks like the Abro Tracker Collective in Spain and distributed telescope arrays began sharing their own data. This resistance fueled the speculation that something extraordinary is playing out behind the curtain, something agencies desperately want to keep from the public. Because if Atlas and SWAN are converging with intent, the ultimate question isn't just what they are, but why they are here right now. If their meeting was engineered, humanity has blindly stumbled into a mission we were never supposed to witness. Synchronized maneuvers. As independent telescopes tracked 3I Atlas, a highly unusual pattern emerged. The glow of its tail wasn't just fluctuating, it was changing with deliberate intent. Across several weeks, 3 sharp, unexpected accelerations were documented. Spaced almost like clockwork, each burst coincided with a bizarre color shift in the tail. The glow would tilt red, shift to neutral, and snap back, as though an unseen mechanism was actively adjusting its propulsion. Natural comet outgassing happens gradually as the sun's heat intensifies. Atlas's behavior was controlled, rhythmic, and abrupt. For a dirty snowball of ice and dust, this is impossible. For a machine, it makes perfect sense. Meanwhile, on a vastly larger scale, SWAN's massive structure mirrored this exact behavior. Its gigantic tail pulsed with microbursts that subtly nudged its trajectory, acting like highly precise course corrections. One vast and unstoppable, the other agile and small. Both objects seem to be maneuvering through the solar system as active participants in a plan, not as passive wanderers. The most chilling detail? Their thrusts were not random. They appeared perfectly synchronized. Orbital dynamics are usually the one absolute truth astronomers can rely on. But here, the truth is deeply unsettling. Arriving from completely opposite ends of the galaxy, Atlas and Swan lined up to occupy the identical narrow corridor of time and space. Their perihelion points, their closest brushes with the sun, ended up a mere 50 million kilometers apart. That is a gap smaller than the distance between Earth and Mars. Their timings aligned within 3 days, all unfolding precisely during the solar blackout window when Earth's telescopes were completely blinded by glare. For experts accustomed to centuries of comet data, this is entirely unprecedented. Interstellar visitors normally appear sporadically, scattered randomly across space and decades. Yet here, two anomalies intersect the exact same corridor in perfect synchrony, as if guided by an incomprehensible clock ticking on a cosmic scale. It is as if the sun is not just a gravitational anchor, but a rendezvous point, a meeting hub for a mission we are only just noticing. When random chance breaks down, deliberate design remains the only explanation left on the table. Even the most cautious voices in astronomy are now admitting this looks engineered. Harvesting the sun. When researchers compare the energy outputs, disbelief quickly morphed into dread. While Atlas radiated sudden 10-gigawatt bursts, Swan sustained luminosity suggested an output of 10,000 gigawatts. Nothing natural sustains such immense, stable power without collapsing entirely. Asteroids reflect light. Comets sublimate ice. Theories began to run wild. Was Swan actively harvesting solar energy, utilizing our sun as a colossal cosmic recharge station? Was that enormous metallic hull designed to convert radiation directly into propulsion? Some fringe theorists argued it wasn't a comet at all, but a massive fortress construct, its glowing tail merely a byproduct of intense plasma shielding. But the most haunting possibility was that this energy wasn't for travel. It was for communication. Swan might be a beacon, broadcasting data across the void, not to Earth, but to somewhere far beyond. If true, Swan isn't just visiting, it is reporting. And we are clearly not the intended audience. The cover-up and the probe. As both objects closed in on perihelion, the very institutions we trust for truth went dark. ISRO, ESA, and NASA curtailed updates, denied requests for the James Webb Space Telescope's raw observations, and restricted live data. Once public information was abruptly classified. Behind closed doors, astronomers spoke of explicit gag orders, while FOIA requests returned documents drowned in black ink. Observatory staff were reassigned, telescope feeds were cut, and teams were dissolved. This wasn't the standard caution of careful science. This was a blackout of intent. As independent networks filled the void, using repurposed satellites and encrypted data channels, the silence from the top only made the whispers louder. When a discovery threatens power rather than just science, the truth isn't simply denied, it is hidden. That silence may be the most terrifying piece of evidence we have. Behind the cautious press releases, covert operations were unfolding in the shadows. Sources murmured about a classified probe deployed from a hidden orbital platform, a mission designed to pierce Swan's blinding tail with advanced particle scanners and capture high-resolution structural data. It never made it. At just over 1 million kilometers from the target, the probe's signal abruptly vanished. Analysts initially suspected a system fault, until the final image transmitted, a fractal echo, a perfect reflection of the probe itself. It was as if Swan had scanned the probe back in perfect mimicry before collapsing the feed into silence. Engineers analyzing the telemetry described an energy wall, a lattice-like Faraday cage built not just to shield, but to actively repel intrusions. If this is accurate, Swan isn't merely passing by. It is heavily defended, actively countering anything that approaches. The implications are horrifying. Not only is it enormous, it is aware. The seed ship and the lunar broadcast. Data from the Webb telescope added a staggering new layer to the mystery. Instead of the standard silicates, dust, and ice, Swan's spectrum revealed polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, complex organic molecules so structured and refined that scientists argued they looked manufactured. These are the precursors to amino acids, the fundamental building blocks from which biology emerges. Unlike the chaotic chemical mixes of primitive comets, Swan's organics were almost too perfect. Theories shifted. Swan might not just be a machine. It could be a seed ship, a carrier designed to distribute life across star systems. If the massive, shielded Swan is the fortress and the agile Atlas is the drone, together they could represent the multi-stage execution of a vastly ancient mission: observation, protection, and potentially colonization. Earth's role in this story might not be incidental at all. We could be the next phase in a plan drafted tens of thousands of years ago. As the blackout deepened, independent trackers noted that Swan and Atlas weren't just converging by accident. They were actively aligning toward the exact same region of space near the Sun. For natural objects, this precision is absurd. This orbital dance looked deliberate, like two vessels meeting at a harbor. Was it a refueling event? An audit where Atlas delivered its collected data to Swan for transmission? Or, more unsettlingly, what if the rendezvous wasn't between them, but with us? Why align so visibly, precisely at the moment in history when humanity finally possesses the instruments to watch? Then came the signal. Swan wasn't just reflecting light. It was emitting radiation in a frequency band, somewhere between gamma and soft X-rays, that is naturally silent in the universe. It pulsed with exact precision, overloading ground-based detectors and causing temporary blindness in an Australian telescope array, effectively acting as deliberate strategic jamming. Swan was loud, disruptive, and commanding, bending our instruments to its will. Amateur satellite trackers then intercepted a burst of energy fired from Swan. It wasn't aimed at Earth. It was aimed at the Moon. The wave packet was layered in harmonic tones, polarization, and amplitude. Cryptographers scrambled to decode what appeared to be an executable instruction set. When triangulated by NASA's Deep Space Network, the destination was confirmed: a specific lunar region known for dense mascons, massive gravitational anomalies buried beneath the crust that geology has never fully explained. The chilling possibility arose. What if Swan was activating something dormant beneath the lunar surface, waiting for the correct signal? The Moon might not be our silent companion, but a component of a system we never comprehended. The awakening. During Swan's approach, global monitors began registering violent anomalies within the Earth itself. Across continents, magnetometers pulsed synchronously every 43 seconds, perfectly locking on Swan's emission cycles. Seismographs globally recorded ultra-low frequency vibrations completely untethered from tectonic activity. Most terrifyingly, whole populations of migratory animals, insects, whales, birds, shifted their navigation vectors in absolute unison, responding to an invisible compass that had suddenly flipped. Earth was resonating, acting as if a memory buried deep within its crust had just been violently awakened. This was no longer an astronomical event happening out there. It had fundamentally reached us, vibrating through our very planet. Astronomers are now piecing together a narrative far too frightening to say on record. What if Oumuamua, the strange 2017 visitor, was the lock, a silent keyhole probe sent to test if humanity was ready? And what if Atlas and Swan represent the key, the drone and the fortress, the messenger and the guardian? One collecting data, the other carrying the authority to unlock something ancient. Supporting this dread is a final, disturbing coincidence. During Swan's most intense pulse, both Voyager spacecraft briefly broke protocol, transmitting bursts of undeciphered data, as if something dormant inside them had just been triggered. If this is true, Swan's arrival isn't the beginning of a story. It is the continuation of one written into the fabric of space long before us. The observed. The James Webb Telescope was constructed to peer outward and decode the ancient universe. Instead, it has handed us a terrifying reflection. Swan and 3I Atlas did not stumble into our neighborhood as cosmic drifters. Their silence, their impossible maneuvers, their scale, and their synchrony all scream of intent. A drone and a fortress, a lock and a key, a rendezvous we were never meant to witness, but saw anyway. For the first time in human history, we may have intercepted an ancient sequence, perfectly timed to return the moment we built the tools capable of noticing it. The horrifying truth is this: we were never the observers. We were the observed. The resonances rippling through our fault lines, the coded lunar transmissions, and the magnetic pulses all prove that Earth has been a node in this system far longer than we knew. The blackout imposed by our agencies speaks louder than any press release. We demanded answers from the stars, and instead, we were handed a mirror. Swan and Atlas prove we have crossed a threshold where the cosmos is finally responding to us. The most terrifying aspect isn't that we don't understand what is happening. It's the realization that we were probably never supposed to. The question is no longer whether humanity will make contact. The question is whether we already have, and whether the true signal wasn't the one we received, but the one we sent simply by looking up. Because sometimes the mere act of observation is the message itself. And now, the universe is finally answering back. I'd love to hear what you think about this, so drop a comment below. If you enjoyed our conversation today, please share this video and subscribe to help the channel grow. Every bit of support counts.